All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Monday evening. My name is Baba Israel, Artistic Director of the Performance Project. I want to first give a big shout out to Emma, our Space and Production Manager, who is behind the scenes, managing our virtual space right now. And thank you for your support. I'm very excited to be here with 4 of our artists in residence with the Performance Project, and a chance just to connect, to share a little bit about their process, their work, and to share what they have coming up in the coming months, and in some cases next week. And I'm really excited to be here with you all. If there are, if as we go through our conversation, if there are questions or comments, we encourage you to put them on the Facebook feed, and we'll find a way to get those questions over to us here. And so I'd like to begin just to say a little bit about the Artist in Residency program here at the Performance Project, and then I will begin to introduce our wonderful artists in residence, and we'll hear from each one of them. So the Performance Project is an arts program embedded at the University Settlement. The University Settlement is one of the oldest settlement houses in the country and has been involved in community engagement and outreach since the 1800s. And the Performance Project was founded by Alison Fleminger, and I have to check the exact math, but we're definitely over a decade now. And it's a really special and unique program because it's an arts program embedded within a social service organization. And so it's, and particularly our Artists in Residence program, it really looks to find artists who are interested in a community process, a community collaboration that helps to reveal a new piece of performance. And that's one of the things that's really at the core of our work, that this is not an artist in residency program that's about a artist creating in isolation, but really in creating in conversation with a variety of communities. And within the settlement, that could mean seniors, based within a senior community center. It could be young people of all different ages and after school programs or early childhood. It could be recent immigrants in our adult literacy program. It could be community members at our Cornerstone Community Center. So there's a lot of different paths, and some artists choose to work with one community, some artists work with several. And we'll learn a little bit tonight about who our current heirs are working with. So I'd like to welcome you all. Good to see you. Thank you for taking this time on a Monday evening. To spend a little time to get to know each other, to hear what each other have been up to, and to share some updates on your journey. So I'm just curious if we can go around maybe first and just introduce our names, and however it feels important to identify ourselves in whatever way that feels important to you. And maybe just to start, maybe something about your primary practice, like, or it can be a hyphenated practice if you're a multidisciplinary artist within one being. So let's just start there, and we'll pass it around, and then we'll go a little deeper, and I'll ask you a little bit more about, your process and what's exciting to you. So we'll just start with an introduction, and I'll pass it to Philip, and then Philip, you'll pass it to somebody.
Great. Hello, my name is Philip Santos Schaefer. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a playmaker developing projects that straddle the line between performance and social practice art. And something that I would describe as being core to my practice is I think I am infinitely nosy. I walk around and wonder what everybody's thinking about all day and why they're thinking about it. And when I walk past an apartment where there's no curtains, I look into the apartment and I wonder what it would be like if I lived there, or if we were friends, or if you invited me in for a cup of coffee. And that is integral to my art making. And so far, it's been very fun. So that is my intro to myself. I will pass it to Nicolas.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm Nicolas. I'm currently in Austin, Texas, although my home is in the South Bronx.
All right.
I would say that life itself is my medium and that the world is my studio. And I come from the tradition of people like Linda Mary Montano, who is a mentor, friend, and an art mother. And I'm very excited to be here tonight. And I will pass it to Leah.
Thank you. My name is Leah Tubbs. I go by the pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm the founding artistic director of Mod Arts Dance Collective. We are a Harlem-based nonprofit dance company. The word that comes to mind is lineage. I think of the shoulders in which I stand upon to be here before you all in this very moment. With that being said, I will pass it to Ming.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Hello, other panelists. It's so nice to see everyone. And happy Monday. I'm Ming, he, him. I would say my sort of the grounding practice that everything else stems out of is theater. And one thing that I definitely also keep at my core is this idea or belief that everything that any sort of interaction, communication that we engage in is a translation of sorts, and how we all have a very specific background in grammar and vocabulary and lexicon that it stems from. So I love talking to people and trying to figure out, like, oh, why do you use the words the way you use them? And what does it mean? And what is it informed by? Which is just a never-ending journey whenever you get to talk to someone. So, yeah.
I love that. All right, beautiful. Well, we're starting. I love how we're beginning right now. There's a real sense of mutual respect and care in the virtual space, which I love. And there's a real, there's already we're sort of populating the space with some content about, our practices and what we bring. And I'd like to unpack that a little bit more. And one thing I want to also say, I'm here to facilitate. But, if one of your fellow artists in residence says something that you're curious about, if you have a question, we can absolutely open this up to a group dialogue. So feel free just to jump in, and I will adapt as necessary. So, everyone keep their own curiosities alive. And but let's unpack these things a little bit more. So, each artist has a different tradition. Nicholas, I love this term use of an art mother. And I have definitely different mothers and fathers and uncles and grandparents. And, I grew up in the living theater and an artistic community surrounded by many artistic influences. Some of those have integrated into my practice. Some of my practices are very different. And so I think it's interesting to just unpack more about, before we talk about the specific project that you're doing with us, like, what drives your curiosity? What is important in your process? I love hearing from Nicholas that, life is your medium, right? And your studio is the world. It's an expansive approach, or Philip also has a sense of that. You're walking around spaces with a sense of curiosity. And then Leah, you're reaching into the past with a sense of lineage and tradition, and what am I building on? All of these things inform. And, Ming, you expressed a great sense of curiosity, and wanting to learn about other people's languages and see what that tells you about your own practice in a way. So I open it up to anyone who feels moved just to share a little bit more. I mean, I know for me, some artists, they start with a book, they start with research, they start in a library. Some people start by walking through a neighborhood, some people start by listening to music. When you're beginning a practice, when you're beginning a process, what are some of the important steps, qualities? What do you look for in a collaborator? Is how, I just open it up. Let's see where we start. Who's ready to jump in?
I can go because I have like a spiel that I
Yeah.
think it is, to me, explains what I do, which is I think that being alive is like driving down a highway, and everyone is driving down the highway together, and like theoretically we're all headed in the same direction, and sometimes you get to drive alongside other people, and sometimes you get to roll down your window and go, hey, how's it going, and sometimes you drive alongside each other for a real long time. but you can never get into anyone else's car, and you never actually know exactly what it's like for them. And I think that, to me, that is infinitely inspiring and infinitely frustrating, that I don't know what it's like to be anyone else. And I think that most of the work that I'm making stems from a question of, is anyone else experiencing this? Does anyone else feel this way? Or if you don't, how do you feel? And why do you feel that way? And what is that like? I believe that everyone should have creative space to learn about themselves, and I want my performances to do that. And then I think once you learn about yourself, you should be invited to share. And I think that once you share, you should be affirmed in abundance. So I try to make plays where you get to say, hey, I just figured this out about me while we were playing together in this make-believe scenario. And then where someone else says, that's beautiful, that's amazing, that matters, because it does. And so I think that that's a big part of what drives what I'm up to. And then the other thing that I'll say is I really think it has to be fun. I think, someday I'm going to look back at my full life, and I hope I can say, I had a nice time. I had a good time. And so I want to bring people into fun spaces as well.
I appreciate that commitment, and I feel a lot of hope when you share, Philip. I have to say, you give me a lot of it's an enlivening presence and commitment that you have. And I think, we'll talk a little bit later. You're dealing with the subject of grief in your project. And I think for me, it's quite inspiring and amazing to see you bringing a spirit of play and fun even into that process. And we'll talk about that more later. So opening up to other folks, I mean, Philip gave us a really beautiful sense of their practice and what drives it, and some of the sort of touchstones that are important, some of the anchors, which are really joyful anchors. They're anchors that I think are very colorful and are adorned. They're not your traditional just heavy metal anchor. They're like beautifully decorated anchors is what I'm seeing. So open up to the rest of you. What could you say more about? I'm curious, Leah, if there's some, in terms of lineage, in terms of, are there specific traditions that you look to when you're beginning a process, when you're entering a choreographic process, when you're thinking about your work as an educator? What sort of drives that process? What is important to you? What informs it?
I think of community. I think about the communities that we serve. I think about multi-generational experience. So I think of, how do you engage people from various generations? I tend to approach my work with the thought of, will my parents enjoy the movement? I have a very fond memory of my dad seeing me do the Nutcracker, and he was with a friend, and he loved it because I loved it, but it wasn't necessarily his cup of tea. And he would slightly doze off, and there was someone next to him, and they would wake him up just before I would go on stage. So he would be fully alert to see me perform. And so I always think of, when I'm creating, is this something that my parents, my family will be able to have a visceral reaction? I think of accessible movement aesthetics that really speak to the Black and African diaspora. I think about music that creates a memory, that you see the sway in the audience, this immediate connection, and just wanting to leave people feeling a sense of hope, and feeling inspired, because I feel that by us just being here, it is a form of resistance. And I feel by leaning into joy and love more, that is also a form of liberation, because we don't see that enough.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So for Ming or Nicholas, as you listen to your fellow heirs, as you reflect on your own practice, I'm just curious if there's anything that you want to bounce off what has been shared, or something that's important to further articulate about your practice. I mean, I know, I'm curious, Nicholas, to talk a little bit more about your expansive statement, because I think a lot of people come from different traditions. Some people come from a conservatory tradition or a formal studio practice or, very structured kinds of processes that take place in very specific spaces. But, you spoke about a process that was as expansive as it could be in a way, and so how does is that about a sense of liberation, a sense of subversion, and sort of to break open the sense of a building or an institution where art making is usually locked into a specific environment with a certain gatekeepers, but you said, no, we're doing life and the world. We're going to go totally expansive. So could you share a little more about what that means to you?
Sure. Thank you for asking me to expand on that. For me, the process is about self-transformation, and in the act of doing so or kindling self-transformation, inviting others, those I come in contact with or vice versa, to contemplate transformation as well. I cannot impose transformation on others, so I start with myself and then, hey, are you up to this? And when I get to a place, I usually do a lot of traveling, and a particular situation that comes to my mind now is when I went to live to a small town near Barcelona called Calaf. It's maybe an hour away from Barcelona, and that was in 2007. And my intention was to meet everyone in town, or as many people as I could, and going from being a visitor to becoming local in the place. And so there were hardly any tourists there. Everybody knew each other or knows each other, used to know each other for centuries. It's a long story. So I will be walking down the street and I will be on stage. The only time that I was not on stage was when I locked my door at the old city hall. But anytime I went outside, I was already performing in a way, quote unquote. And some of the questions people asked were, are you an anthropologist? Are you a photographer? Are you a sculptor? So the roles, questions about roles went on. And I say, yes, I know, and maybe all of those. And with all of that said, I think that a statement that has stayed with me is one that Linda Montano has formulated in some ways, and I hope that I'm quoting her correctly, and that is, what happens when life is enough? And I think that's what I'm working with. And there's there's the whole back and forth between art and life. Art is not life, and I argue that without life, there's no art, period.
I love that.
Categorical. There's no art without life. Thank you.
That's beautiful, Nicholas. No, it's very inspiring and close to my heart. My late father was a member of the Living Theater, and he defined his work as performing life, and he saw the whole world as his performance experience, and whether it was on a train or in the street or in a theater, it was all part of the same process. And that's something I've tried to explore in my own life. And some of my favorite so-called performance experiences have been in the public, in moments that weren't booked by anybody, except that moment, so I really appreciate that. And I think it's a good thing to stay in touch with wherever you are in your journey as an artist. There's a lot of vitality in that awareness, and it breaks down a lot of systems, I think, in some ways that can be difficult to manage as an artist. So I appreciate that so much. Ming, I come to you, and as you listen to these different frameworks that people are sharing, what does it make, where do you connect? Where do you differ?
Gosh, I mean, beautiful responses to, I think, to these questions from everyone. And I think of, and I resonate and connect with all of them in certain way. Like Philip talking about the highway, it's such a beautiful, fantastic image to just explain this life that we live. And I think and then also what Leah said about communal and multi-generational work, I've value that so much in my own life because I have found that the most important life lessons are ancient, and there's this sort of the this with art, a lot of the struggles can be like, what am I creating? Am I creating anything new? And I'm like, for me, it's not about the newness, because what does that introduce? I don't know if that, but yeah, it's just the finding comfort in the ancientness of everything that we're doing, that we're talking about, and how deeply rooted it is, and just in what life is, and how art cannot exist without life, and life is itself is ancient. So I know already the image of the high already makes me think of, in my work, of like, oh yes, we're all in our own cars, but then sometimes people don't know how to drive a car. So you make a little manual for them to drive, or their tire falls out and you got to make it's still their car, but we have that ability as artists to help each other in that way. And I love, Nicolas, what you were talking about, your visit of, because I think it connects in my own thinking of like what I think translation is, of, are you a local or are you a visitor? And like, when does that definition start to merge and blend, and it's no longer clear? And what does that do in our own existence and relation to everything around us, which is so important to continue revisiting. And that for me, and that's something I love to just revisit over time. And so yeah, definitely a lot of reflection.
Beautiful. I saw Nicolas, I saw your hand come up. Did you have a comment you wanted to share?
No, I was just responding to Tuami. Am I saying your name correctly about driving? Because I don't drive, and I happen to be in Austin actually teaching a class on walking. We're walking in Austin, and that's kind of like what would be counter to the idea of the Texas and all of that. And I do have a story about trying to cross a highway in Dallas. Like, I don't know, one of those like 16 lane, if there's such a thing, highway. It was raining long time ago, and I needed to get to the other side. And I'm glad I made it alive. So cars and pedestrians, yes.
I hear that. Well, yeah, I'm actually just learning to drive now. I'm beginning a new journey, and it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Well, I'm so grateful for this, and I love that. I think for me as an artist too, in my travels, I've done a lot of traveling as an artist. I'm very grateful for that opportunity, and your ability to connect with a local community and to learn from it, and to have this co-conspiratorial relationship, I think is quite exciting. And I think let's talk a little bit now about the specific projects that you are bringing to the Performance Project. There's obviously information on our website, there's a blurb and all that, but let's bring it to life a little more organically. So I invite anyone who feels moved to first, just to share, what is your project that you're bringing to the Performance Project? And in a moment, for those of you who already have started to engage, we'll talk about that, but more, why was this project important? Why is it, how does it connect to your practice overall? Is it building on a body of work? Is this the beginning of a new chapter? I want to also reflect, I feel sometimes that obsession with newness is very much about sort of marketplace, commercialism, capitalism. It's like new product, new this, new that. So I think, when there are other influences, then other things become important, other curiosities become more important than just making the new shiny bauble. So yeah, thinking who could jump in and talk a little specifically and describe your Performance Project with us this year? Who feels moved to jump in? I saw Ming jump in there, Sola. Go ahead. You're coming up soon.
Yes, yeah, I think, yeah. So my project is coming up first week of May, which I would love to see any and all of you if you're available and capable. So it's more specific about my project. So the title of my piece is Painam al-Muhajir, which is a combination of Tamil and Arabic. with the intentionality of in English translates to traveler's journey. And the intentionality of using these two languages was to root the topics of love and immigration, which the project deals with as an ancient tradition that is human, comes from human history, and is rooted way deeper and is natural than what we are often exposed to. Going back to that idea of newness, and some of the inspirations from it come from my own life, going through the experience of learning a new language, which was English, seeing my family experience the same, seeing my friends experience the same, and the new relation to the world with an access to a new language and what that does. What does it mean? And specifically looking at love, what does it mean to now experience love in a new cultural, linguistic context? And how do you share it with the new people that you meet? And what does that do to your being? And then at the same time, what does it do to the love and the relationships that you've established before? How do you take care of them now with this new context that you embody? So speaking of community engagement, I had the opportunity to work with the literacy department. Huge shout out and thank you to Myra and the teachers and the students. It's been wonderful coming into the classes and interacting and speaking with other students who are going through a similar an experience that I myself have driven a car, and now I get to see. I love that. I'm gonna keep bringing it back. Thank you so much. Yeah. So this experience of moving and the impact it has on ourselves and our families and our close ones, which the piece is very much about. And my background and training is most recently in musical theater, but as a kid, I didn't know that was a genre. Because that's like America, it's like, oh yes, musicals, we know what that is. For me, it was, I enjoyed playing music and listening to music. I enjoyed dancing and I enjoyed acting, but I didn't know that there's like a thing that kind of connects it all. So then, huge discovery of like, oh my gosh, a huge art world. How fun, how fantastic. People just get to sing about stuff they want. So I got to learn more about it, and one of the lessons that the teachers shared with me was the characters, the story, the sort of traditional storytelling of musical theater is the characters only begin to sing once the words are not enough. They're so taken by passion, they're so taken by emotion and everything that they just have to break out and go, into the song, which I thought, oh, fantastic, very fun, stakes, we love the drama. But then sitting in that classroom, I thought, well, what about a character that is learning words and gets tripped up by those words, right? And I reflected on my own experience of listening to music as a child, or anyone as kids. We first hear the music, right? We hear the beat, the rhythm, the harmonies. We later learn about the words, but that doesn't stop any kid from singing whatever song, even if they don't know the words, and have the best time, right? So I became interested in, with that context of learning a new language, how does a person who is stuck in this, or not stuck, who is in the process of learning new language, get to sing and have their moment and have that be beautiful where they are. So yeah, that's pretty much the project.
Beautiful.
It's an hour long, and there's also another component. The story itself, I'm hoping, and I'm hopeful that the literacy students will get to attend, because there's so many things that they'll see and be like, oh, that's literally from the class.
Nice.
But with music, and and the joy of that, and I enjoy playing with genre, and which I think is another very necessary component to introduce into musical theater. Me being now quote unquote a musical theater artist, how do I expand and allow for more instruments to be included. So that's the project, and there's like I said, a component that features the students from literacy classes documenting their own experience and some of the conversations that we've had around the topic, along with providing a historical context of what we're talking about, which is immigration and the impact of that specifically on this soil.
Awesome. And just for anybody tuned in, or anybody who sees this later, that will be premiering next week at Inspire Hall on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I might see if Emma might be able to put a link with some information on that on our Facebook. We'd love to see you. It's going to be a beautiful piece. And I want to just acknowledge that Ming is a really incredible composer and lyricist, and is writing some beautiful music and words for this show. And I'm really looking forward to experiencing it. So just wanted to express my gratitude. Great. Link is in the comments. Awesome. That's what we love. Thank you, Emma. So maybe I might pass it to, unless anyone has any questions or thoughts or reflections for Ming, I was going to pass it to Leah next to talk a little bit about your project and the work you're doing with us at Eastside at Beacon. And also specifically your project and the vision for it. Yeah.
Thank you, Baba. So our residency is a 4.5-month program called We Meet, a free open workshop program. And this program initially was created back in 2020. We actually offered this for a nonprofit called Groove With Me. It's an East Harlem nonprofit dance organization, and they offer free classes to girls ages 4 to 18 who reside in Harlem and Bronx. And I taught modern there for a few years, and initially the goal was to provide just a safe and open space for artists, especially teen girls, female identifying artists ages 12 to 18. And it was just to provide them a safe and open space. So they worked on movement, they created movement, and we also had a roundtable discussion. And so initially this was every Saturday in October in 2020. And because clearly the way the world was, the solos that they created premiered in a virtual dance festival that we presented in November of 2020. And when we were gifted with this opportunity to have the support of the Performance Project, that we leaned into the audacity to dream big, and we thought, why not expand it to 4.5 months and to offer it to all Black, Indigenous, and people of color youth ages 12 to 18. It started January 7th, and it will run all the way to May 13th. And there will also be a celebration for all of the participating budding artists on the 20th in alignment with our company's solo concert. The reason why this was created in 2020, and we're so happy to have the opportunity to be able to provide it now, is because there are a deficit of safe and open spaces for children, I think even more so children of color, to be able to find their artistic voice, realizing that they have the power to change the world, and also to add a an emotional, a mindfulness component as well, because I think looking over how I show up in the world, thinking about mindfulness, meditation, visualization exercises, breathing exercises, and thinking if teens could have these tools, and instead of being reactive, but being able to take a step back and reflect and be able to lean into accessible tools like just stopping and breathing, or stopping and tapping into their five senses, maybe finding a color that really resonates with them and finding as many things that have that color, just to be able to allow them to stop, to pause, to breathe before what those next steps may be. And so being able to combine the mindfulness component and also a snippet of a roundtable discussion where each month focus on a different theme. So between one month we focus on compassion, and it always started internally, and then we expanded on that. So we would always start with what it means to have self-compassion, and then the next week would be how does that compassion show up for their family, and then to expand it to how are you able to show compassion towards people in your neighborhood, and then that next week, how does that compassion extend towards people you don't know? So allowing them to see not only themselves and to increase their admiration for self, but also to be able to see the world around them and how they could hold space for everyone, all the space that they encompass and occupy, as well as how they also have the power to shift this world to be the world in which they want to live in. So it was providing that roundtable discussion tidbit. And for movement, it was pedestrian because we wanted it to be accessible. I feel that everyone is a dancer, whether they like to identify that way. And I feel a lot of times as children, there's such a freedom to just simply be. And I feel sometimes as we grow and evolve, for some of us, we lose that. And so being able to find what it means to walk and what it means to walk purposefully and what does it mean to create patterns with pedestrian movement and build movement, and then also to create choreographic elements, so as they're building, they're also learning composition components, like what does it mean to move low movement, like low to the ground, or medium standing, or high, like jumping, different types of jumping, and just being able to have a different choreographic element every month to go with whatever the underlying mindfulness or roundtable discussion theme was. So every month they're slowly progressing and learning different concepts, but also learning tools that they can take with them to continue to grow and thrive as they continue to grow and evolve as people. Thank you so much to Kim, to Jolene, to the Beacon Center, to Westside High. They have just been absolutely phenomenal and more than gracious with their space and with helping us spread the word, and just always just being such light. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you,
Thank
Leah.
you, guys.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing like a really holistic approach. And I think that, you're working with young people who are navigating an extremely challenging time. I mean, one, just a time in terms of that moment in your life, but also coming out of the pandemic, coming out of such a period of social reckoning and so many things coming to the surface for a lot of communities. I just really appreciate you offering something tangible that can help people with like self-regulation and with just being able to navigate the complexity of life, in addition, and seeing how that integrates with an arts practice and with a dance practice, and that can be completely integrated, and also to see young people as not just receivers or participants, but to support them as give them agency and authorship. I really appreciate that commitment. Yeah. I would like to jump to Nicholas because, your project is coming up in the summer. And, I'm curious, if you could share a little bit about, what your intention is, who you're curious to work with and what kind of a process you're going to be using specifically when you work with some of our community members.
Thank you. It was great to hear about both of your projects, and they're really inspiring, and they seem to be, in a way, in a positive way, so counter to so much of what's happening now that is so object-based and everything is about the market. And I talk about, people talk about the art world, and I think about it immediately. It's like, for me, it's a euphemism for the art market. It's, I don't know why, it's a personal statement, of course. There's only one world. Maybe
Right.
there's many worlds and they intersect.
Sure.
So thank you. This is inspiring. And I will be working with or inviting elders to work with letters. So this is an extremely simple project. I have a suitcase full of letters from, 30 years ago. I think I might be the only person in the family who has such a thing. And the other day I went to the Caribbean and I opened my suitcase, and some of my letters were kind of thrown away, and I retrieved them and cleaned them, put them in a suitcase again, and put them in a closet. I found a letter of agreement that was sent to my uncle, who's a gynecologist. It was sent to him by his supervisor, saying that, it's great to have him at the public hospital and that his salary was going to be the equivalent of $30 a month. So we were all laughing. We were all laughing. And then I found all the letters where I'm like talking about my grandmother, who's now dead. She's present always with me or in me, and talking about my cousin and all of that. So that brought a lot of joy to my family to find those words and those stories. And so I will be inviting elders to use or utilize the letter writing format to write, to forgive somebody, to forgive themselves, to leave some kind of statement to somebody who's coming after them, write a letter to their younger self, write all kinds of letters, and some of them I will be written and then destroy. Some of them will remain within the private realm. And the idea, and this might change, is to then work with perhaps a group of younger people, I don't know exactly who will be, to have them read the letters in some kind of event, to read the letters back to the elders, and maybe work with some of their personal items like clothing without really impersonating them, but just being grounded and being hugged, embraced by them through some of their personal objects as they read letters about these elders, and also as a way of giving them perspective about their own lives. So it's different to read a letter that you wrote yourself or that I wrote myself. It's different than when somebody else reads that letter to me. So it's a way of giving space, creating more space and a little bit of distance to reflect on the writing. I've been working with elders for a long time. I don't even remember, maybe more than 2 decades. And elders have been the one who have been introducing me to elderhood, especially elders in the South Bronx. So they took me in as one of them. I also co-host an elders group with Thrive Network in California, in Oakland. That's done virtually. And they said, we're going to let you in, but you're a young elder. And so everybody, 75, 80. So I'm one of to say he's not technically an elder, but we're going to let him in. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing this training on elderhood through the work that I do.
That's beautiful. It's a really, I consider it a sacred practice, what you're doing. It really is very sacred. And I would say our dominant culture has a very unhealthy relationship to aging, and to how we interact with elders. And, I've been very grateful that within the Performance Project, there's been a real commitment to bringing artists. We had a group of artists who came in and they cooked with our elders, and they explored the connection between stories and food. And it was a beautiful, these were two theater artists. They had no experience with cooking really, but they came in and, they were exchanging recipes and cooking in the senior center. And then all of a sudden that led to storytelling, and it ended in the creation of new types of sandwiches and new types of dishes and meals. And so there's been many projects. We did another project that brought elders and young people together in a different way. So this is an important sense of continuity for us. And Nicolas, I'm really excited for you to, and our elders, there are so many stories, there are so many, things to be shared and to be witnessed, and so I appreciate, Leah, this sense of multi-generational intention. It's nice to see that living across, several of us as artists here. I'd like to pass to Philip to share about your project. We sort of hinted at it earlier, but can you share a little bit more?
Yeah. So I'm working on a project that is called I Love the Way You Say Goodbye, a celebration of letting go. And it is a celebration of letting go. What that looks like is three sort of major pieces. The first is one-on-one interviews that I'm doing with people about grief, about loss, and about saying goodbye. The interviews are taking about an hour. It's 19 questions. My desire is for the process to feel calm and celebratory, and not, I don't think for me, it's not about when were you sad, but really focusing on what is the support that you look for, what is the support that you give. Those interviews are ongoing. I just put a bunch of dates on my calendar that I'm available till the middle of May. So if you want to chat with me, please let me know. I would love to talk to you. And I'll say that I'm very grateful to have worked with some of the mental health practitioners at University Settlement to create that process, both in terms of creating something that feels healthy and affirmative to the people being interviewed, but also something that, I can go home and continue my night. So that's the first part. And I've been doing interviews with sort of broad swath of people, people connected to University Settlement, people who I know, collaborators, and now there's some people who I don't know how they heard about it, but I'm seeing them. So, it's fun. The second portion of it will be on the summer solstice. I'm throwing a party celebrating loss and celebrating letting go. And I think, I want to talk about how we process, and I want to do it in a space that feels joyful. Something I've been thinking about a lot is I think it's really beautiful that we don't run out of room for sorrow. And even when it feels like, nothing else could affect me, I couldn't feel any more. We still can. And there's something, that's horrible. It's so awful to experience, but I also think that it points to something really beautiful and meaningful about how endless compassion is and how endless empathy can be. That there's always room to experience the world, that it doesn't stop affecting us. And then the final element of the project will be publication. I'll probably end up putting it online, although that's not what brings me the most joy. So my focus is going to be on making a physical version, a zine, with community-generated tools for processing loss. And I'll say that my personal sort of stakes in this is that I wasn't really raised talking about grief. And I think that culturally, that feels quite true in the United States. It feels like something that I've always done quite privately, and let me step out of the room to go feel this sadness. Let me not make it someone else's problem. And I think that it's really necessary to work together and work within community, both to learn what tools people are using, but also to build the muscle of having these discussions, so that it's possible to support each other. That is the project.
Beautiful, beautiful. I wanted to, just before, I know, Philip, that maybe you have a little activity to do with us in a moment, but maybe before we go there, I wanted to see for Ming, for Leah, and Philip as well, obviously being aware of any confidentiality or, maybe not using people's direct names, but I'm just curious if there's any interactions, I'm specifically addressing, because, Nicholas has not started, you haven't started your process yet, but for those of you who have done interviews, been part of classes, who are hosting young people, any moments that you're curious, that you'd like to share about, how it's impacted your work, your process, what you've learned, what it maybe has deepened for you, or what you're excited about in terms of interaction with any of the participants you've done so far. It could be what you've learned from an interview, a workshop, an interaction, and one or whatever pops into your mind at this moment that stands out to you. Go ahead, Ming.
Well, I swear you have another sip. Love it. Thank you. I'm just reflecting on the interviews, and I think it's one of the one of the beauties, I think, of the interviews is how sort of communal and unifying they feel in many ways. We have our own stories, the things that and also many of the things that have been shared with me. It's so nice to hear similarities of there's one question that I liked asking at the very end of, like, if what are some piece of advice that you would pass to other people who are about to move? And most of the time it's bring a lot of money and learn the language, which I'm just like, I mean, but that's so real, that's so true, and the impact of, like, no matter who I talk to, everyone kind of has come to understand that for what it is. So it's been an eye-opener in the sense of, like, truly thinking about the layers and the depth of how deeply does this answer really, where does it come from? Like, how far back do we look to understand and recognize where that knowledge, that tradition comes from? Because it's the same answer from someone that I've talked to that's from Mexico, from Kazakhstan, from China, which are, completely different, which are just different regions of the world, and yet we all have this understanding here of that. So, and also,
please go ahead.
Yeah, just the fact that there's so much there's always hesitancy in giving those interviews and talking about such an intimate experience, which I'm sure Philip and Leah, you can also attest to, and how, but also just the beauty of, at the end of the interview, how much just it doesn't feel as much of a weight, just more of life that we all live, that is a gift on its own. Yeah.
Beautiful. I mean, one thing that came to my mind is you spoke of people having this common answer about money and about language, and I think what it says more about, I think, is America in a way.
Absolutely.
And that's what imagine we could have a whole other relationship to immigration. We could have there could be a whole other societal process, that I'm sure all of us could design together that would be so much better, that would not make people feel that those were the first two things that they had to have to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel like they could navigate a system that is so oppressive, and so non-affirming, and so I think that that's also in a way important. There's a sort of indictment of our culture in a way, in that answer, and as much as the insight and resilience of the people you're talking to, you know. I wonder if you could just say a little bit, because I was very interested, you know, you referenced this idea of ancient and things that sort of transcend this moment in, you know, this political system, this culture. I know that you've been looking at myth and fable a little bit too, and you know, as a way into dialogue. And I'm wondering if you could just say a little bit about that and how have people responded to that? Because that's such, myth and fable are pretty different. I mean, there's myths and fables about money and language, but you know,
Yes, for sure.
yeah, but there, you know, that's a theme you find. But I think there's also something more ephemeral, more timeless, and time connecting, you know, with this
Yes.
idea of mythology and sort of archetypal fables that you find, you know, we find fables all over the world that sort of evolve separately but have common relationships or even common symbols with animals or aspects of nature
Yeah.
or human, you know, interpretation. So yeah, just a little bit of that would be great.
Absolutely, which I'll just give a little, I mean, spoiler of, there's one song that very much deals with human mythology and ties in different myths and stories and epics from India, from the Caribbean, from Europe as well, and how I mean that I think my own interest in it just lies from my own childhood growing up, and the myths being right, the ancientness and the traditions that have been passed down, usually in a either familiar or a communal setting, like learning about a story in class with other students and being fascinated by, oh, there's a whole, like, I'm thinking of uh, um, the beautiful like tradition and practice of grief that you're creating, Philip. Of that reminded me of this story that I read with other students in 8th grade called Jadu, which is all about the like traditions of paying respects and seeing your ancestors and talking with them and checking in on them, and how the stories, any story that we create today is so rooted in something that has just come way before anything that we understand today as well. So coming back to that, and the beauty of also creating scenarios in which we embody the myths, because I think that's what they're there for as well, and the lessons and the themes that we should be consciously engaging in every day. But just yeah, they're told in such a fantastic, amazing way that I thought for sure that's something I want to include in my practice, because that's another thing that happens when you learn a language. You learn so many amazing stories, right?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. We're going to start to round off pretty soon. I wanted to give an opportunity to Leah if there was anything that you wanted to say about any of the you know, anything you've heard back from teaching artists or anything that you've observed, and then we'll kind of end with Philip, who's just going to give us a short activity to kind of bring us to a close and hopefully inform your process. Yeah.
I will say that I was thrilled that the budding artists were so open to collaborate. Even in day one, where we had them working on creating movement on different levels, and one of the artists asked, "Oh, can we work together?"
Nice.
I said, "If that's okay with everyone, let's." And they so there's a really great component to where they work on solo work, and then they always do a collaborative work as well. And just to see them not only work together in movement, but even they have a small window to either dig a little bit deeper in exploring movement, or maybe they're wanting to lean into writing, or they're wanting to draw, or they're wanting to do another mindfulness exercise. And so they'll even coordinate sometimes visual arts projects where they'll actually, one time they drew a anaconda. And so they each chose a section of the body to draw. And so I think it's just been so great to see this community emerge, and them just showing a lot of respect and admiration and cheering each other on, and I feel like getting a glimpse into a role that we want to see.
Beautiful. Well, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here, and I feel enriched and uplifted by this process. And I would like to pass it to Philip to kind of bring us home and take us into a part of your practice, I guess, a little mini part here, and we can together contribute to your project.
Amazing, thank you. And thanks everyone. So a big part of the interviews that I'm doing and what I envision being a part of this performance party event is focusing on tools, practices that people use when they're processing loss, and both the ones that people invent for themselves or discover by accident, and those that are passed down from community or learned over time. And part of art imitates life. I proposed this project a year ago in the summer, and I started writing these questions in the fall. And since then, I've been going through my own grieving process. And it's been really wonderful to be actively engaging around what do other people do? And one of the first things that came up in one of the first interviews I did was the importance of asking for what you want, which I think is really hard for some people. It's hard for me. I think it's not hard for everyone, but it's hard for me. And I think one of the things that's hard about asking for what you want is knowing what you want. And knowing what you want can feel really impossible. And so this is just a quick practice about that, because I believe that theater is a space to practice the actions that we want to perform in the world. And so we're just going to do a quick practice of asking for what you want. To start, just check in with your body. If you're sitting, put both feet on the floor. Let yourself find a way to be comfortable, whatever comfort feels like for you. This is an entirely judgment-free process, so comfort can be anything. And take a few moments to just breathe and get in tune with your physical self. You might have a tension somewhere, or a muscle you need to stretch, something you need to breathe into. And as you're getting comfortable, I want you to listen in to your little voice in your head and ask yourself, what do I want? And I want you to listen to your own answer without judgment. There is nothing that is too impossible. There is nothing that is too minuscule. And there's no permanence. This is just what you want right now. And it's not a burden for you to want it. And if you feel comfortable, I want you to speak what you want out loud to yourself.
One at a time?
Yeah.
Or
And you can be
muted,
on or off mute, whatever feels, joyful to you. And ask, what does it feel like to acknowledge to the world what you want right now? And even consider what it would be like to share this desire with someone else. Not because they are going to give it to you, but because they will carry that knowledge alongside you. And just knowing is enough. And telling someone is not a burden. And thank yourself for being yourself and for being open with yourself, which isn't an easy thing to do. but I'm thankful that you're trying.
Hmm.
And I'm thankful that you're you. And if you want to share what you want with us, I celebrate that. And if you want to just hold on to it and go, oh, interesting, that's what I wanted today, that's good too.
I can go. I always say, talking about elderhood and inspired by your meditation, and this was this was in my mind before, and it resurfaced when you invited me to say, what do you want? I always thought that I wanted to be 50, and now I'm 56. I say I can't wait to be 50 to say what's in my mind. And now I want to tell my students, do not wait until you're 50 to say what's in your mind. Just say it, maybe in a mindful way. So that's what I would like. I would like to invite those who have to say something to say it in a compassionate way without holding on to it and creating all kinds of anger and tension and hatred and all of that. Can I say that in a compassionate way that invites for more conversation and hopefully for empathy and relationship? Thank you so much for this practice.
Beautiful, beautiful affirmation. I'll share quickly that at first I just wanted a simple hug. I felt the hug, but then when you sort of made it more expansive, the hug turned into a levitation. And then I levitated up into a cloud, and then I felt myself just floating on a cloud without a care in the world, feeling so light. And for a moment I felt that, and I haven't felt like that in a very long time. So I had a little bit of a cloud floating fantasy, which was very nice. Thank you. Does anyone else care to share? As Philip said, no pressure, if not.
I feel like I'm in a place right now of wanting a lot of tangible things.
Mm.
Of like, I want an apartment on 72nd Street that costs $1,000 a month that I can move into next week. And I want a bowl of mac and cheese and a gin gimlet. I feel like I have all these huge existential desires right now. And so I've been really trying to like, what can I go get? And I can go get mac and cheese, even if I can't get that apartment. And so I'm trying to like open myself up to the small wants too. So because sometimes it's just nice to go, okay, you know what? I didn't get clarity, but I did get a great meal with a friend.
Beautiful. Well, I think anyone who got to tune into this or tune into this later will be richer as a human being, and will gain all kinds of wonderful insights in how to live life and be an artist. And I'm very grateful for you all taking the time on a Monday. Remember that Ming, your project is next week, right? And there's a link in the comments, 4th, 5th, and 6th. I know, Nicolas, you're out of town, but Leah and Philip, if you're available, please, we'd love to see you in the house. And then keep an eye out for Leah's company's culmination in May, and Nicolas and Philip coming up in June. And thank you for tuning in with us. And thank you again to Emma for making everything flow so smoothly. And have a wonderful night. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Cool. All right. I'm not sure if we're still streaming. Okay, well, I'm going to say thank you and have a great evening. I'll be in touch. I have things to follow up with all of you in different ways, so we'll be in touch soon. Okay. Good night, all. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Nice
Bye.
to
Nice meeting you guys. Have a good evening.
Have
Bye.
a lovely evening. Take care.